Hi, good morning. I always worry at this point that the audio is not coming through, but I will assume that it is. I might do some checks on that actually. But welcome to the ZP Developer Zone. We do this at 8 a.m. Every Thursday, London time, and also for people who are clearly asleep at this kind of time, it's probably worth saying that obviously it just stays up on YouTube afterwards as well, so you can follow us. You can follow us later on YouTube. Anyway, let me dive into it. So I'll go quick. There's been a lot of questions. So thank you for coming to the live streaming webinar. Appreciate it. We do have at ZP a lot of collaborations. So I'll touch on collaborations, and we also answer questions from our ZP Developer Zone. So first of all, a lot of the content or a lot of what we talk about on the ZP Developer Zone is driven by the forum. So if somebody has a question, they post it in the forum. We try to go through and answer the questions. So these were the questions, most of the questions up until about 12 hours ago. Cool. So these are the questions from about 12 hours ago. So the things that we're going to cover today, I'm going quite quickly because we like to keep it nice and efficient, so I will go quickly. We had a question about capillary fill sensors, and so I will answer that this morning. We also had some questions sort of hanging around from hanging on from data sheets. We had some questions about an Ethernet port on a potentiostat. We had some questions about reading signals from our oxygen, pH, and conductivity sensors. The inquirer is asking whether the output was 4 to 20 milliamps or 0 to 10 volts, and we'll discuss that. A whole series of technical questions around immunosensors using antibodies or such as the detection. Just saying hello to some people who are online with us at the moment. And then some more questions about response time. So, like I say, there's lots to get through. And even when you look at these questions, there's some of them, there's like 5 questions buried in there. So, it's lovely to have the questions. Let's be efficient. Now, I did promise to give out a webinar today about metrics for biosensors. But actually, because of all the questions that have come in, I still can't give that webinar. But I do want to do a webinar, and I will, in one of these soon, I'll do a webinar. I'm going to do because I really want to properly define the range, the limit of detection, and the limit of quantification of biosensors. I do want to properly define the, and I will touch upon it today, the response time of biosensors. I want to sort of define the sort of time to get to signal, the T90 time. I want to talk about settling time or the wetting time, the time it takes for the signal to settle. I also do want to discuss resolution. People are interested in what sort of signal can I resolve, and that really needs to be a sort of in-depth conversation. We want to talk about sensitivity and offset between different sensors. And I do want to talk about specificity versus selectivity. And then for the guys who are really developing diagnostic tools, where you're answering the question, does this person have this disease, yes or no? Then we need to we need to discuss something called the confusion matrix, where you talk about true positives, false negatives, true negatives, and then we can talk about the sensitivity of those types of assays, the specificity of those types of assays, the accuracy of those types of assays. And I know that a few of you at the moment are really learning Python and such things, and really get into data science. So the confusion matrix will be your friend when you get into as you progress on that. From the confusion matrix, you can actually calculate something called the receiver operator characteristic. So when you're talking about sort of lateral flow devices for COVID-19 sensors, they might say, they have an accuracy of 70%. They're making that claim from having done a receiver operator characteristic curve. and they're looking at the area under a curve. Whereas let's say RT-PCR is sort of 95% accurate. Again, they're looking at the they're looking at the receiver operator characteristic curve. So we do need to discuss this stuff, and I've already just burnt 5 minutes on it, but I still haven't got time to discuss it. It's it's going to be a 30-minute conversation in itself. So at Zimmer Peacock, here we are. We're here to really oh, hi April. Cool. So we've had one of our really long-time members just join on. Interestingly, actually, April is interested in Surra's disease, which is a parasite that causes blindness, unfortunately in cattle, but in people as well. So the confusion matrix would be like a good place where we'd apply that. And in fact, when I think about it, we did some work with April. If you look at some old webinars of ours, we were using image recognition to spot the parasite, not spot the parasite. And in there, we were actually discussing the accuracy, and it was the confusion matrix that helped us determine the accuracy. Anyway, going onwards now, we've got a few people waiting. So ZP is here to... Our raison d'etre is to get people onto the biosensor market with products. Secretly, that's what we're up to. Now, we've shipped recently some 200 hyper-value electrodes to someone, and I just wanted to kind of answer their questions. First of all, we shipped them more than 200 electrodes because they're concerned that we put some crosses on here. Now, these crosses, I have told the production manager, don't ship them with crosses on them, just take them out. Because what he's done is, we're very keen. Now, first of all, the crosses do not indicate that they're not functional. It's just he's had a good deep look at them and decided that there's an imperfection on them. If you get those from us, we will have shipped them as extras. You can use them, but use them to do like optimization on. Don't use them to gather let's say the final data on it. I want to say something very clear. We Zimmer Peacock, we do wafer mapping of all our batches of screen printed electrodes. If you get screen printed electrodes from us, they're really reproducible compared to what's on the market. We've got a really good guy who's, he's done PhDs and postdocs around the world, and he's used gold electrodes. He just can't believe how repeatable our gold electrodes are, which means nothing to us because we're used to it. But he says, no, you buy gold electrodes that are screen printed, and if you do cyclovoltammetry on them, the curves are all over the place, in terms of heights, but ours are really reproducible. Anyway, to this particular inquirer, the crossed ones are extras. You can use them to optimization on, but I wouldn't use them to get the final data. They've just been visually inspected. But as well as visually inspected, we've actually tested the batch by wafer mapping. And anyone who's wondering about Zimmer and Peacock, I will put these links, if you see these links popping up, I'll put them in the description below. Yeah, but Hasim's just said, good QC, Martin. Yeah, he's right. We're visually checking them. We've functionally checked them. And it's really the only company that does this mass checking. Now let's dive into the sort of inquiry. So if you got crosses on them, keep them, use them for optimization, but don't use them for like collecting sort of final data. Now the inquirer had a few things. What I like about this inquirer is, look at the detail they've given us. They've given us nice, photographs and stuff like that. So he's a little bit concerned about the scratch here. So you can just about see the scratch here. Now the anatomy of this is, along here is the reference electrode, and here is the counter electrode, and here is the working electrode. So his signal is primarily driven by the working electrode. So little scratch on the reference or counter. If it is a scratch, we can see something, but we're not sure what it is. But it won't affect the quality of the signal. That's primarily driven by the working electrode. So that's why we would have shipped that. Now, we didn't provide that connector, but I'm just going to hold this up. This is the kind of connector that's on that board. So I am familiar with that kind of connector. The reason I bring that up is, if you're using connectors, any kind of connectors, you just have to make sure that you're lined up well with a connector. So here, I know that this particular connector is known to me. We didn't supply it, but it's known to me. That it's essentially got the conducting or the contact points are along here. So in this electrode, they're all lined up pretty well. I'm going to answer the question that came in to us is, why is it darkening here? And it's really good actually, because the reason it darkens here, just out of interest, this is the counter electrode. So in a 3 electrode mode, no current goes through the reference electrode, so it's remained, sort of more or less untouched. Counter electrode's gone dark. Now I'm going to answer the question why it's gone dark. This is the CV they've sent us, and it's pretty good. Everything's consistent up here and here, but they want to answer the question why it's dark, or partly why it's dark. First of all, they're going to quite wide, not quite, very wide voltages. In biosensing, you really generally don't go much below minus 0.5 volts or much above 0.9 volts, and that's the kind of window, let's say. Here they've gone to 1.2 volts and down to minus 1.2 volts. Power is equal to voltage times current. So they've got, like, in an extreme here, they've got a current of minus 200 microamps. So it's essentially just gone too wide in this voltage window when doing the voltammetry, and in the negative voltage region, they've generated a lot of current. And it's that passage of current that will have caused the darkening of their counter electrode. There's a sweet window that they really need to be, let's say, operating in. It's approximately this window, and it's almost like a waste of time. There's a window where your signal is. You don't need to be going outside of that window, because it's good to explore it when you're first doing assay development, but there's no need to kind of all the time be doing it, because you're just going to end up with messy little features that cause confusion, but also you can end up damaging the electrode. Just for everyone's kind of interest, I'm just going to highlight some features here. This feature here, you get a wave like this. That is probably the oxygen reduction. And this feature down here, when it goes, where the signal just goes very negative, is probably the hydrolysis of water. So to preserve the electrode and to prevent that darkening, don't sweat the darkening too much, but just move in a smaller voltage window, and that'll essentially increase your experimental throughput. I mean, if I look at that approximately, I would have sort of halved the experimental time by just working within this box that I've sort of shown you. Now this is the thing that hurt me the most, that actually some of the sensors appear to be bad. So they've but they're good guys, they've sent through all the data. I appreciate that. There's nothing worse than you get that sort of inquiry, your sensors are not working. It's like, no, they will work. Let's just give me some data, give me some images, they'll work. So what you see here is they say no, there's electrodes that don't work, and the first thing you notice is this is nanoamp, right? So and it's also around about 1 nanoamp, which I know is the limit of this particular instrument. And then they get some features here which are really just the electronics messing around, because so the electronics basically don't know there's a sensor there, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. So all in all, this entire thing is in this box of like 10 nanoamps. They've really got nothing going on here. Now when we look at a photograph that they kindly sent us, what you notice is that they've actually got ink, like sort of spreading. They've also got little bubbles on here. So what this tells me is there's an awful lot of voltage being applied but nothing going on. And the reason being is this, that the counter electrode, working electrode, reference electrodes, let me just bring in those 3 arrows again. Essentially this piece has not been aligned in the connector correctly. So it's literally not in contact. So this, when you get signals flatline like that, the biggest reason is generally misalignment. It's generally misalignment. So we are the only company that's doing a lot. We're the only current company that's doing a lot of wafer mapping. So we know our electrodes are good. You can take that one to the bank. We absolutely know it. I mean, it's things like, when you look at Zimmer Peacock, I'm going to show you in a bit, parallel potentiostats. You all know about Julie. We're really big on high throughput testing and high throughput data correction or collection rather. And then so when somebody says, you know, I'm just getting no signal, but they're so nice, these guys. They've sent us good quality pictures, which really helps me troubleshoot. So really want to appreciate that. But it's lovely. You can see that in fact they don't align. So that's unfortunately the root cause of the problem here. And we've seen this before as well. That you know, this is some data that we got a while back where, you know, some of the sensors were just, you know, working beautifully. And we would expect that because we ship them those screen printed electrodes, and then suddenly they have a problem. And in the end, we ended up having to design a connector for it because people's connectors ran out. People don't align them correctly, so we ended up having to make a connector. So if you've got ZP electrodes and they are giving very bad signals or zero signals, it's probably the connection that's up. And hopefully now these people will be able to put their electrodes in and just line up properly, and they'll be back in good shape. They've also asked a question about has Siemens, some of the guys in Indonesia are particularly expert on gold nanoparticles. So I really hope that they could reach out on this one and maybe make some comments, because the guys want to sort of put down some gold. I suggest first of all use the electrode with the crosses on it, because you can waste those ones. They're essentially free. They want to do it at minus 0.25 volts, which seems perfectly good. They also only want to do it for 60 seconds, which is good. So it's not, you know, not that much voltage for not that much time. My only slight concern is that 0.5 molar H2SO4. So I think you'll be perfectly fine doing the deposition of gold, and because you're doing it for 60 seconds, you'll probably get away with using 0.5 molar sulfuric acid. But just use a couple of the crossed off electrodes just to have a little practice on, because you don't want to waste too many of the let's say the pristine electrodes. And what I suspect is that sulfuric acid might end up sort of darkening the reference the counter and the reference, which should be okay. You should hopefully be okay, but just try it is my quick answer. If anyone's got any experience, let me know and we can sort of bring it up next week. So now I'm just going to go on to the next question, which was about it's already 18:17, so I'm going to go a bit quick. Right, so we have the anapot. The anapot's going to be mentioned a couple of more times today on conductivity. It's going to be mentioned. It's also going to be mentioned on making immunosensors. We have the anapot. I love this instrument. It works now with Julie as well, in terms of we're now able to take EIS data and put it up into Julie. The question is, does it have an Ethernet port? And the sad answer is, unfortunately, it doesn't have an Ethernet port. And we don't have any models with Ethernet ports. I know this was a big thing. I have owned these potentiostats as well with these Ethernet ports, but we don't have an instrument with an Ethernet port. We have Bluetooth connectivity, but we don't have Ethernet ports. So short answer, but you know, I do appreciate it. Reading signals from sensors. So this one came in, and I promised to answer it here. And I thought it was an interesting question for the forum, because when I was in academia, I'd never heard of 4 to 20 milliamps or 0 to 10 volts or 0 to 5 volts. I didn't know what this was about. When I got into industry and started doing essentially engineering systems and control systems, then you soon become familiar with what this is. So when you see this, it essentially tells you that somebody has an industrial kind of background and they're used to using industrial sensors or industrial control systems. So the quick answer is we don't have any instruments that give out these kind of traditional signals for that kind of control industry. The pH sensors are essentially giving out millivolt signals. They're potentiometric. They're a form of ion selective electrodes. To read these, you will need high impedance voltmeters. I am going to talk about measuring the pH sensor with an Arduino board in a minute, so hopefully that's helpful. The conductivity sensor. I'm going to talk about how to measure the conductivity sensors in one of the other questions. So the nice thing about the forum is two people have asked questions that are related. So pH sensor, I'm going to talk about how we measure at ZP. I'm also going to talk about an Arduino solution in a bit. Conductivity sensors, I will talk about them in a bit. The dissolved oxygen sensor, it's an amperometric sensor where we're applying 650 millivolts and we're reading a microamp current. So let me guide you towards some information. So we have the just trying to remember now, the application zone, where there's a whole bunch of videos about different electrodes or different sensors. So you have a video on pH, we have a video on oxygen, and we have a video on conductivity, and I'm going to put a link under this video after we've finished going live. So the quick answer is you can see these videos, you can see how we use these sensors, you can watch the video and you can see the type of signals that we get off it. But the short answer is they're not coming in that sort of standard 4 to 20 milliamp or that 0 to 10 volts or that 0 to 5 volts. I do understand the question, but the answer is no. They're giving out more of a sort of R&D signal rather than a sort of signal that the industry would be directly looking for. It's not that we couldn't do the conversion or do an adapter between the two. It's just we haven't, is the quick answer. This is also a Collaborator Support. So a Collaborator's received some of these electrodes. Again, it's great. You know, they sent photographs in. I can clearly see what they're asking. So really appreciate that. What they're referring to is these electrodes. They've got like a new generation, but the original generation is up on the website, where they've got essentially, we call them capillary fill electrodes with filter in place. So they have a capillary fill electrode with filter in place. So we have a capillary fill, and the capillary fill electrode is like a traditional glucose sensor. It will suck the sample into it. So it's really good for moving sample onto sensor. It's really good for controlling the volume. Now the version that they have is the filter version. So I'm hoping that they intended to order it with the filters, because they have. So we have two configurations, two capillary sensors, one with filter, one without filter. The ones that you have are with filter. You don't have to remove anything. You just need to add the sample here, and it should wick in or capillary fill in the sample onto the sensor. We do have a bit of a video on this, and I'll have to link to that underneath below. If you have any more questions about this or get stuck on these, give me a shout. We are very supportive of people. Yeah, and here's a link to the page where I've essentially got this material from. Sorry, lots of questions, lots of answers, lots of discussion. We had a series of questions in, and the first thing that I noted was they were quite interested in using an Arduino board. It's worth saying that we do actually have some material on our website about measuring pH sensors with Arduino, and you can use that kind of solution to measure the pH, the nitrate, the chloride, because they're all potentiometric, ion selective, electrodes. So you can use that solution for those. Just wait 1 week though, because we've been doing some work for measuring the nitrate sensor using Arduino. So I would recommend just waiting a week or so, and we will put some more material up about measuring the nitrate sensor specifically with Arduino. So we're going to update this page with some more information. But when we've done it for nitrate, it will be just as relevant to pH and chloride as well. Now the oxygen sensor, the question is, can you measure it with Arduino? I said earlier on, it's an amperometric sensor. You apply voltage, you measure current. So there might be a potentiometric way of measuring oxygen, because there's something like the ORP, the oxygen reduction potential. I have a suspicion that you could actually measure oxygen by voltage, but I've not done enough research to absolutely say that. And conductivity, I haven't found yet a way of truly measuring conductivity using an Arduino. I'm going to talk about conductivity a little bit now, and but I'm not going to give the answer. I'm just going to talk about it and say why I'm not so sure on this one. I mean, with a conductivity, the way that we measure conductivity, we apply a sinusoidal wave of approximately sort of 10,000 hertz with approximately plus or minus 10 millivolts. This is from memory. And then we get a current response. Now the amplitude of the current response is essentially proportional to the conductivity of the solution. So big amplitude, low resistance and high conductivity. Small amplitude, high resistance, low conductivity. So we apply the sinusoidal wave. So I started having a look, but I haven't found an answer yet whether you can do this through Arduino. I imagine you probably can, but essentially the Arduino has to give out a sinusoidal wave with about a frequency of 10,000 hertz and about plus or minus 10 millivolt amplitude, and then you have to essentially look at the current, and the ratio between the voltage and current is the resistance. So I haven't so much answered your question about Arduino. I've got a suspicion it could happen. I just haven't found out how to do it. You can do it on the Sense Smart. I've got to check with our engineers, but I was talking to them yesterday that it has EIS capability, which I was a little bit surprised by. If anyone wants to ask us in the forum, we might be able to get a demo of that, because it would be interesting to see that. There's lots of information about the Sense Smart on the ZP Academy. And also this little potentiostat or electronics for biosensors has EIS capability, but we haven't launched it yet. It's just such a beauty. It's so small. It has EIS capability. So that exists but not launched. The Sense Smart apparently. The Clark concept. Yeah, Ali's just mentioning the Clark concept. Yeah, the Clark electrode. Yeah, I think Ali might be onto something there. So we might be able to measure oxygen via voltage, and I might have to dig into it a bit. Yeah. Ali, you're right. I think Ali's right. So Ali's just made some interesting comments about. So if you want to measure oxygen by potential or voltage, it might be the Clark electrode. I might have to dig into that a bit deeper. So thank you, Ali. I appreciate those comments. Very cool. So I'm going to come off this question about whether you can measure conductivity in Arduino. I haven't quite answered it, so I'm still investigating, let's say. The other thing they were interested in was us estimating some ranges, response times, resolution, and lifetime. Now they wanted us to do it for all these sensors, but I took the first sensor first of all and just show you how I would do it, or how I am doing it. First of all, range and resolution. This is a pH sensor. This is I should have put a picture up here, but in fact, I'll just grab one. Our pH sensors look like this. They're super cool. They're super small. They're very solid state. But that's one of the. This is one of our pH sensors. I mean, its ranges, we've tested them between pH 9 and pH 2, which is probably good enough for most people's ranges. Also, in terms of resolution, I've just kind of zoomed in here a bit and said, the way if I look at that, there's a very clean signal there at pH 3, and there's a very clean signal there at pH 2. So it's easy for me to sort of draw a line in here and say, well, look, you can already see that I could resolve the difference between 3.0 and 2.5. So I suspect that the resolution really is our sensor, but I think our sensor will be fine. It's actually your electronics that's going to be the problem. That's why it's so important for me to have that conversation about resolution. Because resolution, people think, is it the sensor? No, it's the sensor plus electronics that actually drives resolution. But when I look at our raw signal, it's pretty clean because we're using the anapot in this example. And if I draw a line in there, you can easily see that I can easily resolve the difference between 3 and 2.5 and 2.5 and 2, and I suspect you could subdivide that quite a lot and still get good resolution. Response time, I realize it's 8:29. I need to go faster, but I apologize. So they want to know about response time. I mean, response time is, I draw a line here, whereas my starting signal, I draw a line here, which is my final signal, and I see what time it takes me to get to 90% of the final signal. So there's a sort of time there. And essentially I say, well, my T90 is 50 seconds. So that's how to sort of talk about response time. Now we do have just making sure that I've still got internet connection, but I'm sure I have. So the T90 is about 50 seconds. The lifetime, it's a hard one. When somebody asks you what's the lifetime, glucose sensors have a really good, let's say, lifetime. And the pH sensors have a really good lifetime. The sensor that's has the worst lifetime is actually the lactate sensor, because the enzyme is so wimpy. But at least the pH sensor, the nitrate sensor, the nitrate sensor, we stick it in the soil for 3 months, it's still working. So many of our sensors are fairly robust, but unfortunately you have to try them in the application. This is a different inquirer. The inquirer here asked, apart from HCG, do we have any other immunosensor type experience? We have a lot of immunosensor type experience. At this project, at this moment alone, we've got at least 3 immunosensor programs going through the business, and a classic one would be this COVID-19 sensor for detecting COVID-19 on the breath. They also wanted to know about whether we could detect pico concentrations. Pico is pretty, and that's right. This was a hard answer. So the question is this: when you're doing an immunosensor, the limit of detection is really proportional to sort of, in part, the effort that you put into it. The more good resources and the right people that you put into a program, then the lower the limit of detection. The limit of detection is very rarely fundamental. Trying to detect one molecule in a liter, that I would consider pretty tough, if not impossible. But it's interesting, actually. I think the chat is gone, but hopefully so the limit of detection, pico concentration. Now, if you have a large molecule, that really helps with the limit of detection. If you have a highly charged molecule, that really helps with the limit of detection. And then there's tricks that we would pull to do amplification. So the quick answer is, I believe you can do pico concentration. I'll show you an example of nanogram concentration, which you might not be so happy with, but I'll show you some work that we've done. But yeah, we do a lot of immunoassays. We've got at least 3 going on at the moment. One of them is this type of COVID-19 sensor, which is more than just in our lab, it's actually in hospitals. We probably are capable of doing pico concentrations, we'll discuss it in a bit more detail. At Zimmer and Peacock, we're actually super capable of immobilizing antibodies onto electrodes. We generally do it through carbon electrodes. So we actually have a troponin I project on at the moment where we're using carbon electrodes, and at least 3 other programs that are using gold electrodes. So we're pretty familiar with it. And I like the question here, on average, how accurate are the antibody electrochemical biosensors ZP? So I'll show you some data, actually, maybe how to answer that question. First of all, at Zimmer and Peacock, we're really set up for doing biosensor development. It's become, sort of industrialized. You go to our facility, and this is an immunosensor that's being tested in our lab, and you can just see obviously the environment is well controlled. Any sources of contamination are extremely well controlled, and we're just taking so much care around this. We're not just making 1s or 2s of these sensors. Each of these little petri dishes got a lot of sensors in there. When we're doing testing, we're not testing one at a time. We're testing, we have 10 and 12 channel instruments. In the background there, I can see that we're doing EIS. And and we have jigs where it allows us to kind of mount multiple sensors at a time, so we can just come around to testing them very quickly. It's probably worth saying about the robotic systems. Here I'm only showing you our manual effort, because obviously depending on scale, the effort can be manual or it can start being robotic. But this is the kind of environment and setup you really need. And then you'll actually see that we even take these setups and environments into the hospital settings, so we can actually get some real, let's say, clinical data as well. This is some data. So at the moment, if people are doing immunosensors or antibody type sensors, I'm actually recommending these days EIS, because we're having so much experience, so much good time with EIS. So here's some data where we're doing 5 nanograms to 75 nanograms, and we've got really good separation between each one of these curves. So they're all done in triplicate. So this is small volume manufacturing. It's very hard to make reproducible sensors when you've got small lab-based manufacturing, but we are able to pull it off just because of the experience of the team. But of course, this is 5 nanograms. The questioner was asking about picograms, but this is the data that I can put into the public domain. But it does tell you about our ability to, let's say, make repeatable sensors and measure them by EIS. So my recommendation is actually, you need Anapod EISs to do this kind of work. You probably need to get an account on the Julie database. It's probably worth saying that we do a biotinnylated gold electrode, which can be useful for putting antibodies onto the surface. I sort of recommend the gold electrode. We use the gold electrode most frequently, though we do have a project on at the moment using carbon electrode. Now, if you really want to accelerate your program, then at ZP we do things called proof of principle, where we essentially, I think, we can get most biosensors or immunosensors, at least get the proof of principle in the clinical range in about a time of 3 months, with a sort of 100 hours worth of effort. So Zimmer Peacock, we support people in the development, and we also do development on behalf of people as well. So I'm going to summarize now, because I realize that this has gone on, not gone on, but for some reason I think the chat shut down today. So sorry about that. So I just want to summarize, which is this. Sorry that we went 7 minutes over today. We do go through the forum, we answer the questions. If you have a better answer, like Ali came up today with a Clark electrode for oxygen, which completely slipped my mind. So there's a forum member who had a better answer than I did. So great. Also, I mean, if you are a client of ours, we're pretty good at supporting you. Just give us images and data, and we can really help you. And you can see that we can put a lot of effort into. Well, I just want to give you a sense of the environment that we actually produce in, and the fact that we do take these sensors out into the hospitals as part of the development. And I promise that I do have a big webinar that I want to do on metrics for biosensors, which I promised a few times now, but I just knew I didn't have the time today. Now, there probably were some more questions that got posted in the last 12 hours. I won't have seen them yet, so they'll have to make this way into the next forum. So thank you very much for attending. Really appreciate it. If you've got any further questions, then just put them on the forum, or we'll try and get to them. Okay, we'll not try to, we will get to them. Thanks very much. Take care.